Well, ladies and gentlemen, I honestly don't know how this is going to go. I know that one Sunday, my daughter asked me to go to her church. And the church is called the Good Shepherd Church. It's located in New York City. And it was very cool. I mean, we actually, I never sit up front. I always try to sit in the back, but we didn't have any room. And the place was jammed. And I would say it was rocking, but in a really good way. I mean, they had a great band. They were singing great spiritual songs. Um, I was just captured by that. And then on top of all that, Micha Boyett, who is the youth pastor, I guess is what she is, she delivered the sermon. And I was just really taken by it. And so when she finished and then things were kind of moving along, I went over and bugged her about, hey, she didn't have any idea who I was. And I just told her that I'm starting this substack and I would like to have her on to talk about her kids. She has three kids, Max, Brooks, and Ace.
August, Brooks and Ace.
Oh, August. Why did I get that wrong?
I don't
Okay.
know, but
I don't know.
well,
Well,
Max is a
anyway,
cool name. Yeah.
yes. So Ace is a young boy who has Down syndrome, and what got my attention, and this is going to be a little spiritual. So if you don't want to think about God, you don't want to hear about Jesus or anything, then just turn it off, okay? Because that's what this is. I don't want to be, but it's also about hope, and it's also about life and how we deal with things that come our way in life. And so you got to be sensitive about this. To me, I have to be because she's in a situation that is much different than the situation that our family finds ourselves in. So, Micah, talk a little bit about that sermon that day. Do you remember what you had to say?
You're putting me on the spot there. I got to remember now what I preached. What was it
It's
about? It
pretty,
was
it's
about,
pretty, it's pretty much what you write about in your book
there was
about the
some,
value, the value of human life. It was really what it was about.
yeah,
And the way
yeah.
it struck me is that as we deal with certain things, even when they're very difficult, and this is what really I thought was so important, that God has a special way of sending blessings and comfort and it was all kind of connected to the Sermon on the Mount. So why don't you go
Mhm.
ahead and just talk a little
Yeah.
bit about all this?
All right. Sounds great. Well, Governor Kasich, thank you for having me. And I'm honored to be here and also honored that you listened while I preached. That's an accomplishment in itself, getting people to actually listen to sermons. So uh, so this book that I wrote that we ended up talking about is, and I pulled a little in my sermon from what I had written about. And it's a book about the Beatitudes, that little poetic prelude to Jesus's longest sermon, and probably the sermon he was most famous for, the Sermon on the Mount. And that little poem, as I like to think of it, was really a, we all kind of recognize it. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who grieve. Blessed are those who are meek. There's this long list of some pretty hard things. And in this in this sermon, I was referring to those moments in our lives that don't really feel like blessings, and how those are the things that are really the foundational ways that God moves in our life, that we are shaped, that we really come to find our authentic human happiness. And and I kind of came to that passage as I was thinking about how my life had changed after my son was born. And you said that he was born with Down syndrome. He is he was later diagnosed with autism, and he actually is profoundly autistic, which means that he's a non-speaker, that he really struggles to control his body, that he faces just challenge on top of challenge. And and I had a hard time in those early years trying to give words to people about how beautiful my life was turning out to be after like these diagnoses and how hard they were. And what I found was this comfort in this passage from Jesus, that there's something there about blessing and the hardest parts of our lives. And the further that I dug into that passage, I started to come to these theologians who were writing about. There's one, Dr. Jonathan Pennington, who wrote about the Beatitudes, and especially this word that we translate as blessed. And that word makarios doesn't necessarily mean blessed the way that Jesus would have used it. And that when he's giving the Beatitudes, he's using this kind of formula that existed already, this Greco-Roman virtue tradition way of giving a talk, like the TED Talk of his time. And in those talks, the person standing up to deliver the speech would be saying, I'm here to tell you how to be truly happy as a person. I'm here to tell you what it means to live a flourishing life. And so you could translate that word blessed as authentic human happiness. You could translate it as wholeness, but it's this bigger thing than kind of how we, especially in the West, think about blessing, where, we tend to be like, we're blessed if we get to go on vacation, we're blessed if we can buy that new car, or the kids are healthy, and so and so is on the honor roll. And instead, it's thinking about something much deeper and richer. It's about like what brings us to flourishing, what gives us joy that is much deeper than the circumstances of our lives, and what roots us.
Uh, okay, so Micah, and you think that's found in all the things in the Sermon on the Mount? Do you think that if one were to pick that up and to read that and think about the depth of it, it is really what you're saying is it's really a search for what Jesus wants us to know about profound, deep happiness or flourishing. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to say. I don't think that Jesus made a list and was like, these are the 5 to 8 things that people must have to experience flourishing. They need to be meek, and they need to be poor in spirit, and they need to like be persecuted. I think that I kind of like to use my imagination when I'm thinking about him giving this sermon, and him looking out at the people who he had already gotten to know as he's walked up this hill with them to give this Sermon on the Mount, and knowing the experiences of their lives. He's listing things that happen to all of us. There are moments of meekness where we lose our power, or where sometimes we give up our power for the sake of somebody else. And there's a gift to be found in that, a sacred gift. There's moments of grief that we all go through. And in that brutal season of our lives, there is a connection and a goodness to be found. And I think it is more about that we're all human, and God wants to meet us and give us like goodness in the midst of the stuff that we could see as just being terrible or
Okay,
really
so
hard.
let's talk about your journey.
Yeah.
So when you first found out that Ace, you were going to was going to be born to you, that doctors had seen something, right? And
Mhm.
to talk about that. Then when he was born, and he's what is he, about 10 right now?
He's 10.
He's 10
Yes.
years old. Talk a little bit about the journey, about how difficult it was, and somehow how you found the light.
Yeah.
There's that I think there's a movie or a book or something called All the Light You Cannot See.
Hmm. Hmm.
Talk about your journey, though. I think it's so important for moms and dads and brothers and sisters who, have these things come at them, right? All of us. Talk about, though, your journey in this particular area.
Yeah, I think there, I mean, I think all parents are the same, where um, we want things to be easy for our kids, and we want them to find joy, and we want them to have success. And getting a diagnosis like this in the state, like in that part of pregnancy before even giving birth, was I've kind of seen it as kind of a blow to the we all, with every one of our kids, come to a point where we're like, oh, I don't have control over who they become. Oh, I don't get to, I can have these dreams for them, but they are their own person and they're going to struggle in whatever ways they struggle, and I'm their guide. And I think for me, seeing what the challenge was going to be, it just came so much earlier. You are presented with these are the facts. This is what the diagnosis is, and these are all the things that could happen or probably will happen. And and I had a lot of grief in that. And it's interesting because I grew up exposed and in relationship with people with disabilities. I had like the best possible childhood to be the mom of a kid with a disability. And still, I I was shocked by the amount of grief that I had. And so much of it, and like figuring out, like pulling apart which part is about me and my ego, which part is about my kid and what I want for him, which part was about my older boys and my fears for them. I was immediately like, are they gonna now my older boys are gonna feel like they have to take care of him when I die, and here I am, I'm pregnant with this with I'm 20 weeks pregnant and I'm worrying about when I die and what my older boys are going to experience. And there's so many things that I think the hardest part of being given a diagnosis for a child, especially a baby, is that you have the diagnosis before you have them, especially when you get this in utero diagnosis. And when Ace was born, after I'd had these months of really wrestling with these things and like, what do I believe makes a human valuable? And what is like, what do I want his life to be? He was born, and I looked at his face and I was like, oh, it's you. It's you. I knew you. And he was not a diagnosis anymore. He was my baby. And I think that that has been the revelation over and over for me is we get to these places that are really, really tough. And then I I have to go, oh yeah, but you are you. You're not these things that are really hard. And there's I don't know, I had this so my son is non-speaking, like I said, and he has challenges with motor control. And a lot of people who are profoundly autistic, that's part of why they're not speaking. That's why, because there's a brain body disconnect. There's my son has language in his head and understands everything I say, but his brain and his mouth will not work together. And that also happens with his body. When you see someone with autism who is flapping or moving constantly or really struggling to like control themselves, or even like, little kids who might run out of the house and run into the street, those are all motor planning. Um, and so yesterday, Ace came off the school bus and they had been trying to keep the seatbelt over his shoulder, and he wouldn't do it over and over and over until he lost control and got really angry. And so he got off the bus, like in trouble with the bus driver. And when he came off the bus, I I was like, buddy, I know you didn't want to do that. I know you didn't want to act that way. And he just started crying. And there's like those moments of connection of like when I see him, who he is, it's not that behavior on the bus. It's not the way he reacts because somebody's making him do a thing with the strap, or his body feels like it needs to take off running when he's supposed to sit still. But there is a child who is a beloved human being who is has a lot of challenges and is still like perfectly human and perfectly himself. And yeah,
Micah, what a, I'll tell you, I've always wondered why the heck I do Substack or why I do anything. Like, what am I trying to do?
mm,
And one of my friends said, John, you do these things because, you don't know what the Lord's got going with you, and just keep doing what you do.
mm,
And so I'm listening to you, and I'm beginning to maybe understand what I'm doing because I am so hopeful that this is going to really inspire and help people. Let me go back to the early days.
yeah.
And, I've read your book, uh, and, it was frantic. It was tough, but somehow, even though when you first saw Ace, you were, he's a little baby now, but then there were so many issues. How did you get to the point where you began to see this? Was there a point at which the sun rose, or did it rise the minute he was born? Tell me about that journey, because there are people that have children that have severe disabilities, and it's like they're just, they're paralyzed. They don't know what to do. How did it work for you?
I think, well, we know life is complicated, right? Like there's not the moments where even as there's moments when everything makes sense, then we go back into the part of the spiral where it doesn't make sense. I always kind of think of life as like this spiral where we're getting closer and closer to the thing that's true and the thing that's good in the middle. And but we gotta keep circling around it for a long time. And so yeah, even as Ace was born, I start getting connected to these people in the Down syndrome community. I start to learn about the way that, just learn what these other families are doing and what life could look like for him. And I got connected with a friend who has two children with Down syndrome who adopted them. And she has an organization called The Lucky Few. And she talks about parenting her kids as this secret like club that only a few people are lucky enough to get invited to. And this vision of seeing our lives with our children this way, and also of letting our children see themselves this way too. I think sometimes as parents, we can, especially like parents of disabled kids, it can be about our story instead of it being about the person with the disability story. But in both cases, like our kids need to know that who they are is good. And that is a thing that we have to fight against in our culture because ableism is kind of like the last great prejudice. The amount of times my son has to walk through the world and hear everything called stupid and dumb. The amount of times that the R word is flung around in his presence, the amount of stares he gets everywhere we go, he's stared at. Like all these tiny microaggressions in his life that tell him that he's not valuable. And so I think as I started to learn that, as I started to go, oh yeah, I am really lucky, aren't I? And he's got this really good life. And there's something really important, like especially I think in the Down syndrome community of recognizing that people with Down syndrome have been part of humanity since the beginning. This is a way of being human to have three copies of the 21st chromosome. And that like this is an important part of being human. And we want every part of humanity to thrive and be present with us. And and for not just for us to learn from people with disabilities, but for us to all give to each other. And so I think for me, the changes that started to happen were for me to like get these visions of, oh, this is not about me. This is not about how much harder my life is, which like there are plenty of times that I feel that, I'm sure I had that feeling this past weekend when I I was feeling sorry for myself that my friends with kids the same age as me are out doing whatever they want and the kids are fine at home and that my son needs a lot more care. But I think that coming back to the foundation of my beliefs about him is the thing that kind of keeps me grounded in what matters most about his life, and that I want him to see himself as not just like good enough, but like a worthy member of society and someone who has gifts to offer.
So, Micah, people may say or might say, well, why did this have to happen to Ace? Why didn't he have an easier time? Or like you're describing his life, and how he hears all this negative stuff and people are staring at him and all that. Have you ever thought, well, okay, why did God do that? Does that ever bother you? Have you ever thought that way?
Yeah. Well, I
Okay.
think
Go ahead.
I think one of the things that has helped me is that I've been like I was the annoying girl in the Southern Baptist Sunday school class who the teacher was saying something and I was like, but what about Leviticus? I had to like why don't tell me that because I know the other verse that counteracts that. And also just this, I asked every question and and I really wrestled with my faith, and a lot of my faith changed, especially in my 20s, to this place of like, what am I going to do about the fact that there's suffering in the world? Whether it's
Yeah.
people I know and love, or people who are children who are victims of war and hunger, and the
And what did you
violence in our
conclude?
country.
What did you conclude?
This is a whole big mystery. And I don't understand. I don't understand. But what I do have is my moments of clarity. And I think that those moments of clarity in terms of my faith have allowed me to live with mystery. So I stopped trying to have an answer to why do bad things happen
Yeah.
or why do hard things happen?
Well,
And yeah,
I got to tell you that I asked those questions, and I don't, this whole thing, does God talk to you? I don't really know how all that works, but I know this. One day, 25 years ago, I'm driving in my car through a little area called Central College, and I am saying, God, how do you make this? Why this? Why that? How does it make? And I got this subliminal message: stop asking. I'm not going to tell you. Okay.
okay.
And, but I tell you, I found, and I want to talk about the boys, the brothers.
Hmm.
Um, but I read this book by a great, great theologian named Helmut Thielicke. And this book was given to me by a man who I have a Bible study, Micah, that's been going for 38 years. We meet
Wow.
every other Monday, and it's not a big group. It's a small group. I don't want to have a big group because in a smaller group, people are comfortable sharing things.
Yeah.
But this guy, Helmut Thielicke, wrote a book called Our Heavenly Father. I don't even know if you can get it anymore. I carry it everywhere. Bobby Kennedy used to carry the Greek way, and he would read it. And so I read Helmut Thielicke, Our Heavenly Father, and all the rest of his books are great too. But he says in this book, and I just talked to two theologians, and I asked them to determine whether what Thielicke said was right. That nothing happens in the world that doesn't pass through the hands of God,
Mm.
and that all things work to the best for those who love God. That's pretty profound, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And he wrote this when he was preaching in a church in Germany that had just been bombed, and he's in his boots, and there's ashes of the church are there.
Mm.
And that's a tough one. But you know, if and I think faith is a gift. I don't think it's something you can't run around a block faster and get faith. I think it's a
Yeah.
gift, and maybe it needs to be developed. But if we really believe that all things work to the good, even when we see evil, that all things, because nothing happens that doesn't pass through God's hands. And a lot of people would say, well, why doesn't he fix this? Because he gives us free will. And maybe to some degree, when you are looking at where you are now, you've come to believe that all things uh, happen for the good for those that do love God. Does that make sense to you, what I've just said?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's what I meant by moments of clarity, that there is this, uh, like, I think our definition of good is can be very squishy. And what we think is good and what we need is not always good and what we need. Um, I think for me, I have seen that that God is has given me everything in my life moving me towards this goodness. But I think that what I've learned is that I can't look out at the world and say that I understand because of what I've gone through, like what the mother in Gaza who lost her babies is going through. And and so I don't know how to say like what God is doing that is working towards the good.
Yeah, we don't
And
know. It's like a
right.
movie, though. You know, we don't
Yeah.
know how the movie ends.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, a theologian, said to me just the other day, sometimes the good comes later, but that gets what does the scripture say? Life is but a breath.
Hmm.
So if I'm going to get if we're all going to have things work for the good, it may be better to have it all work good in eternity, which lasts a long time, as compared to right now. Is that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I do. And I think that there is I don't know. I lost my dad 4 years ago this December. And there were moments of his illness, he died of cancer, where I was like, wait, wasn't wasn't his life supposed to like weren't the things supposed to come together? Wasn't it supposed to like be tied up and be tidier? And like he was such a faithful, good man. And the things that you just want to come together at the end, like in some ways, that goodness showed up for him. He had a beautiful family and we were there with him and it was like the way that everybody dreams of going. But at the same time, I think there's so much of those questions still there of like I still think that it doesn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense. And I think that for
Yeah.
me, embracing the mystery of what that God is doing something that is beyond my comprehension and it's moving us towards the good.
Well,
And
you might
yeah.
remember in Genesis where Joseph's brothers throw him in the pit and he's sold into slavery into Egypt. And make a long story short, there's a famine. His brothers come to get food sent by Jacob, Joseph's father. And when his father Jacob dies, the brothers are thinking, okay, this is Joseph's going to get us now. And you remember Joseph said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good.
Yeah.
And so I am not trying to suggest that knowing that all things work to the good for those that love God makes life easy. Maybe it just gives us some perspective, something to cling to. I
Yeah.
remember when my mother was dying and in a bad accident. I hate to keep telling the story, but she died and my father had been killed. Um, the minister came in and said, I said, you don't understand. He goes, no, but I know one thing. Your mother wouldn't come back if she could. It was something I could cling to.
Hmm.
So what I hope is that people can understand, or we all can understand, not some people, me can
Me.
understand,
Yeah. Well,
that, you know what I'm saying, I
I
hope.
do. I do. And I think that there's also this bit of like, I want to be careful about disability in equating it with like something meant for evil or
I,
something meant for
I, I
harm.
agree with that.
True.
I think that's so important
Yeah.
that needs to be said.
And
It's
that
just
there's,
difficulties. Everybody
it's a
has
difficulty.
difficulties.
Yeah,
And
it
people,
is.
lose their jobs, or people who are poor, or people, you know, everybody has difficulty. So we're not saying that that's an evil or a bad thing, or that God, it's not that. It's just that everybody has struggles. And I think you would agree, Micah, that we have come so far as a society about the way we look at those who have disabilities.
Absolutely.
And we got a long way to go,
Mhm.
but we've come a long way, right?
Yeah, we have. And so much in the past 45, 50 years. When I was born in 79, it had only been in 78 that what was the act passed in 78? Mr. Politics.
I
You
wasn't there in '78, Mike.
in
Come on. But I remember when we passed the Disabilities Act and
in the
it was a guy
90s.
named
Yeah.
Bartlett, Steve Bartlett. In fact, he's just asked me to endorse a book he's writing. He was castigated for what he was doing, and we
Hmm.
got it done. And I love the guy for having done that. And I know that Ace spelled a great word for you the other day. Well, tell us about that. What did he do? How does he communicate? Talk about that.
Well, we're doing something new, and it's been really exciting. Uh, he's learning how to use a letterboard, which is like a low-tech spelling board. And the idea behind it is that for people who are profoundly autistic and struggle with motor planning, it is can be very difficult even to use like what he's for his whole since he was 4, he's been trying to use an iPad to communicate that has just a lot of canned responses. So he pushes a button, it can say, I want, and then to eat, and then a whole thing can come up and say all the things he wants to eat. But it requires so much like individual finding the button, like planning where he's going. It's been very challenging for him to really take it on. But with spelling, it's allowing him to just say the words that he already knows that, and I mean, I've been shocked and amazed by how much he knows that as we've started
Huh.
these lessons and
Yeah.
we have a paragraph that I read that is, an age appropriate lesson on basketball or on the, some the Mount Rushmore or whatever we're talking about, he will spell words that are in that lesson without me saying how to spell them. I just will say, okay, point to the first letter. And he's getting that motor skill of getting his finger there. And with that, he is starting to tell me a lot of cool things. So I'm trying to think of which thing you heard.
You told it was a really long word. I couldn't believe it when I was last time I talked to you. I don't
Yes,
remember, but it was so exciting and
so exciting.
it was a tough word. I can't remember what it was,
Yeah,
but
yeah, it's very cool, and
yeah.
it's a this week he well 2 weeks ago we went to Maine on a little family trip, and uh he went down to his favorite spot. This is where we have a family cabin, and he went to his favorite spot, the Cove, and was down there with his dad. And as they were walking back, his dad noticed his glasses were gone. And so my husband ran back down there looking all over the sand and the water for these glasses. And when Ace got back to me, I said, Ace, did you throw those glasses in the sand or the water? And he spelled sand. And and we looked all over that sand, but the water got him, I think.
So I think we need to be clear. It's just really a matter of the challenges that everybody has in
Yes,
life. I mean, no
yes.
matter what it is, everybody has challenges. Tell us about the boys. How do they feel about Ace? Because I know there were times when he did things where they cheered.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that that is one of the most surprising parts for me of this journey has been the ways that being Ace's brothers has made them tender, has made them aware. There's recently Ace was sitting at the table and we had friends over and I was busy talking to our friends and Ace had a runny nose and I watched my 17-year-old son just walk by with a Kleenex and just wipe his nose and walk on. And that boy, my 17-year-old son is a teenager through and through. There's nobody else in his life that he is like tenderly caring for. But both of my 14-year-old, my 17-year-old, they know how to help Ace on the toilet. They know how to put him to bed at night. They know what he loves and they know how to like understand his body language. And there's so few places in Ace's life where he feels truly seen and known. And I know that at home and with his brothers, even as they're doing their teenage stuff and they're, obsessed with their selves and their own lives, and they still have just this tenderness towards Ace that is really special and I think is forming the kind of men that they're going to grow up to be.
Micah, I wonder. We're going to stop here because I think this is my opinion. We'll see what people that watch this say. It's so powerful. I wondered if we could maybe do something again. Would you be? Did you enjoy this today?
I did. Let's do it
Yeah,
again.
I'd like to just we could explore more, and it's a large dose for people to watch this and think about it. And there's some folks that I want to share your words with, and you're just a delight. It's just great.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
all right, can we stay in touch?
Yes, let's
Okay.
do.
All right. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.